What is the thing that you feel like if you could continue to process, heal, let go of, elevate beyond, will support you the most? What is that thing for you?
Keeping connected in space and time for me. As someone who grew up with very limited boundaries in my family, I actually spent a lot of time physically present. Growing up in a city home, that there wasn't much space or rooms. There was always someone there. We tended to move in a system, us LePeras. We like to think and believe the same things, eat the same food, make the same choices of how to spend our time. And I carry still remnants of that. So as much as I was just kind of describing emotionally, part of my healing is letting people in to my emotional world, allowing them to join me. There is a very big part of my healing journey that also needs to create a separation and a confidence that I can and will meet my own needs, even in absence of that person being there. And I see this in moments from, what are you doing, partner? Let me go spend time with you. Or, what do you want to eat? And kind of deferring and not being able to at times, even if they are present and available to me, coming to the reality that sometimes I need time away, right? I live and work with the two partners that I'm in partnership with, and that's a lot of people. And so for me, it's honoring time, space for just me. And that might sometimes mean I've found some solace in traveling to Sedona for long weekends. And this is something that I don't think I had my first day trip alone until my late 30s.
Really?
I spent no time alone. I think, yes, I took myself out. I remember the moment for the first meal alone when I was something like 25 years old, and I sat down and I ate a meal alone. So for me, it's aloneness that continues to be really integral to my healing.
It's
knowing when I need time to rebalance and separate so that when I do come back, I'm more whole, I'm more connected, and I'm able to be a better partner.
So how do your partners understand then when you need your own boundaries to have space away, but also you're just saying sometimes I might be, passive aggressive or avoidant or whatever, the silent treatment, and then in my alone time in my room or space and feeling like they're not taking care of me or not supporting me or thinking of me.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, how do you communicate then with a partner about, hey, I just need alone time versus I need you to come and check on me in my alone time.
Yeah, we need to get clear ourselves. And I'm still figuring my way out to when is this agitation something I need to be dealing with separate? Because that's how it usually manifests in me. I start to feel irritable, agitated at little things that I could usually, kind of look past or that don't typically bother me. I will start to get passive aggressive, say snarky remarks, and okay, Nicole, you're getting agitated, and figuring out the difference then between, okay, this is an agitation that would be best served by me, maybe even just taking a walk, not necessarily even traveling for a weekend, but just taking some space to just be in my own energy, different than in the moments where I want you to join me. Because for me, agitation is usually a sign that my nervous system is dysregulated, which is typically for me better served with finding some balance before I then engage or ask my partner to co-regulate. I have to be open to the support before, instead of like I am, come help me when I have my arm out.
Yeah, there's so much things can be resolved if we just take 30-minute walk in nature before coming back to the conversation.
Yes.
Not talking before responding from a nervous system trigger, right? So much less pain by just taking a little bit of space in between the event and the response, right? That's interesting. I'm curious about, you mentioned kind of boundaries there and creating boundaries. What happens when we abandon ourselves on the boundaries that we need personally for ourselves, when we're alone, and also what happens when we abandon ourselves with others all the time?
Yeah. When we abandon ourselves, I think ultimately we don't first at least look or hold ourselves responsible. I don't even think we're aware that we're abandoning ourselves. And I think what we more often do is we hold subconsciously this other person responsible. And then when our need isn't met, right? So we've abandoned ourselves and didn't allow our need to be met, instead of saying, oh, well, Nicole, you didn't in this instance share that you needed support. That was the moment where you did not open yourself up to then receive the support. Instead, we do exactly what like most of us did throughout my 20s, which was we blame the other person with this idea that if I just found the right partner, or if you could just change the way you are a little bit and show up in this different way, then I wouldn't feel that way. And we externalize the focus, the blame, and quickly that turns into resentment, which before long can be the ending of a relationship. We've held you responsible for so long that will bring up contempt even.
When we put our feelings, the responsibility of our feelings on other people, like you made me feel this way, like you did this to me, and now I feel this way, and you need to change that. What happens in a relationship when you put the responsibility on the other as opposed to yourself?
Not only do you set yourself up for resentment, I think at our core we are disempowering ourselves.
Right.
We're taking that emotion, that energy of change, and we're giving it
To someone else.
And
They have power over us.
Now we're reliant on them modifying the way they're showing up. And the reality of it is, even the way I was just describing a couple of minutes ago, emotions, right? And even what you shared a bit earlier, I feel sometimes things don't bother me and they bother other people. And other times things bother me and they don't bother other people.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a really prime, simple example of how individual and subjective emotions are. They're physiological changes that happen in our body that are, related to how we're making meaning, all the conversation, the topics we've just been talking about, how we're making meaning of an event, how it's personally relevant to us. So in my instance, right, I'm not considered in this moment, and now I'm going to feel as if that's true. And this is subjectively happening, this filter for each of us outside of our awareness, and what we're maybe tuning into, if we're connected to our body, is the emotional experience. And we might be tuning into the reaction that we're having from that place. But we're going to disempower ourselves if we're hoping you change so that I don't have to feel this way. I think a more empowered stance could be becoming conscious that I do consistently tend to feel this way. And maybe I can even pull back the onion a bit more and turn my spotlight of attention, like I say, to the stories, the actual narrative, the meaning I've assigned to that unanswered text, or to the dishes not being done, or the gesture that my partner didn't give me. Oh, it's because you didn't consider me. Now, the more we see those narratives, I think the more then we could get clarity on how we are, maybe our past even is contributing, and then again, give ourselves the space to become emotionally mature and to learn how to regulate, as opposed to relying on the world around me changing so that I don't have that reaction anymore.
It's so hard to put our, the emotional responsibility of how we feel on someone else. It's so challenging. We've got to be responsible for our own joy and happiness. Obviously, people might do something that you don't agree with, and so you have to have a conscious conversation and say, hey, this is a boundary, and here's my needs. Can we do more of this? But relying on the other person to make you happy is going to be very challenging. Because if they don't make you happy consistently, then you're going to blame them, right? Yes. And you're going to want them to change. Change who you are. Change this. I need more of this, more of this. And it's still never going to feel like enough, which is challenging. There's something I want to ask you about. I haven't seen you since I started doing this work. But I've had 2 different photos of my younger self on my phone since I was in January last year. So I haven't seen you since, I guess, I started doing a lot of healing work myself. And I've been talking about it on the show over the last year and a half. And I had a younger photo of myself when I was about 5 for maybe a year. And now I've got about a 9, 10, 11-year-old version of myself. And it's been an amazing journey to go back and heal certain memories and wounds of the little boy inside of me, right? That felt unseen or unheard or neglected or sexually abused, and all these different things that did occur, and then the stories that I told myself about those things or other things that were not met based on what I wanted. It's been incredibly healing, the journey, to do exercises, intimate work of reconnecting with that little boy inside of me, right? And going back into the past, bringing it to the present, saying, I've got you. I'm an adult in the room now. I can take care of us. I've got your back. Thank you for getting us here. Thank you for overcoming all those challenges and pains and traumas and confusion of the world and relationships and parents and all that stuff. You did the best you could, not blaming him, but you did the best you could. Thank you. Now I'm going to carry us, to the next season of life. And I'm doing that for the version of my 10, 11, 12-year-old self that had different challenges and adversities. And I'm going to kind of do this, every 5 years of like, okay, what were the pains and the relationships, wounds I had here, until it's all kind of come back into where I am now, to kind of mend those wounds. how important is it for us to do the inner child healing? And more people are talking about this in the last few years. And what happens if we neglect the little boy or girl or human inside of us that still has those wounds?
I appreciate you. I was getting chills, actually, feeling my body when you were sharing that. And I really appreciate you speaking so openly, readily, and showing your picture. Because this is one of those areas and those concepts where some of us, even as adults, might even feel a little silly when we hear inner child.
Absolutely.
What do you mean? I'm like decades beyond childhood. I'm past that, ultimately. Though the reality of it is, just like we were speaking about in terms of trauma and the memory that lives in our mind and our body, even if we are decades past, right, this childhood time, this little being that maybe some of us are looking at the picture.
It's still stored
in us.
Yes.
And it's in those moments, right, where we're having that emotional reaction, where we are feeling less than, unworthy, not good enough, that is very much alive and real. And that's part of the complexity of our human experience is, even if it's not objectively present in real time, if our body is going through that physiological reaction, it might as well be. The stress that we're, kind of feeling through our bodies is real, even if it's not happening in our current moment. So I think that's such a huge, important acknowledgement, is that we are carrying the aftermath of those early events. And a lot of times we can see them in our emotional reactions or in our core beliefs as they show up for a lot of us day to day even, and learning how to first just create a relationship with that space, because even if those feelings aren't mapping onto the objective reality of what's happening here and now, doesn't make them any less real.
Yes.
So for a lot of us, when we are exploring our inner child, I think one of the first things that really comes to the surface is the hurt, the grief, the mourning even.
It's not fun to look at.
That we're carrying with us, maybe for some of us, for relationships that never were, for needs that never had been met. And then for everything really in between, and creating space to be a compassionate witness, not to, kind of fall into the mindset of, oh, well, that's back then, right? I don't have time to worry about that now, and really allowing yourself that moment of whatever the feeling is to be the case. And then, like you're very beautifully describing, acknowledging that you do have another aspect of your consciousness now, right? You can access new choices. And you can then, in that space, learn new tools of how to create safety for that inner child. And I believe for most of us, that's part of the journey, whether you want to call it inner child work or not. It's really just acknowledging these older reactions and really creating the space to embody the change. And I'm very intentional with saying embody the change because, again, this is where we can't just have the idea. We can't read a book about a new tool and never do anything, right? It really is the embodiment of, safety, of a new way to cope with my sadness or my grief or my anger in a way that doesn't, or even just general new ways to care for my being that maybe I never learned in childhood that can translate into self-love over time. Love is an emotion, it's an embodiment, and it's connected to our ability to be connected to our organ of love, right? Our heart. And unless we are connected to ourselves, feeling safe enough in our body to be able to be a loving individual, we're not going to be able to honor those around us.